Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson, here once again to talk about Iowa State, the Iowa State Cyclones, the Big 12, college football in general, with everybody that is able to tune in here. Today, last week we did Iowa State's all quarter century team, I should say. Dukester's first one here once again, never fails. And basically created also a quarter century team, a player since 2000. Had a conversation about that, who belongs in there, some really obvious ones: Brock Purdy, Brees Hall, Alan Lazard, things like that, and some less than obvious ones. But this week this week is definitely going to be more of a Q&A week. I will put in the YouTube chat the link to actually call into the show if you have some thoughts on this. I think this is a topic that a lot of people do have some thoughts on, because it's a whole structural argument for college football in general, just because lots of things are happening right now with the infrastructure of the sport itself. So if anybody is interested in calling in and giving your thoughts on the show, over on YouTube at iowastatethevoiceofcollegefootball.com, or it's youtube.com, voice of Iowa State. I would say the voice of college football, one of these words I can think of. You can join in and check out the channel. I would appreciate a subscription. But if you're watching this over on YouTube, there in the comments in the live chat for this is the link to join in and give your thoughts on any of this stuff. So really appreciate everybody that's been able to tune in so far. This is the 21st episode of the show. Actually, kind of hard to believe it's been that we're that far into this, but we're slowly growing the channel. But as we get closer and closer to the season, would love to get this number up a little bit, and just try to find more people. Recently started doing sims of the season for Iowa State football. This is on the College of Football revamped stream, so this is not on College Football 25 or obviously on 26, since that's not out yet. This is just the College Football Revamped, which was a mod on an Xbox game before College Football 25 came out. And this is just simulating the season. This isn't anyone playing with it or anything like that. It's just a computer simulation of the season using the updated rosters for this game. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that the player ratings are necessarily 100% accurate or anything, because there's new guys on the team, on all the teams. But this is just kind of a fun little off-season thing to do. So we've got two of those simulations up right now, and we'll be doing some more of that stuff throughout the summer. But this week we are going to be talking college football, kind of the structural part of the game specifically, because a couple of different things. We did have a development in the NCAA versus the House case. And that, the main development here, we thought we were going to get some resolution on that this week, as far as roster sizes and things like that. And unfortunately, we are not going to get that. This has been the final resolution of this, the final judgment on this thing has been pushed back to June 27th. We were expected to get it June 6th, which is obviously this Friday. And now it has been moved back to June 27th. So we're not going to get this for a couple weeks. And why that's significant is because the new revenue sharing model kicks in, I believe, on July 1st. So, you're pushing up right to that deadline, as far as the new roster sizes and things like that, and ruling on how revenue sharing and all this is going to work. I'm not entirely sure what, I don't know if this means anything, one way or the other on, how this is all, gonna end up shaking out. But essentially they just extended to allow for summary judgment, to file summary judgment, and to get a potential appeal in as well. So we're not going to get a resolution on this for a couple weeks, and we're not going to get it until, most of a month, really. And we're not going to get it till right before that July 1st revenue sharing kicks in. So it's This is a precarious situation that I know many people involved are very frustrated with, from coaches to administrators to athletes, just trying to figure out what the hell's going on, um, especially in college football where this is most impactful. Obviously, the biggest moneymaker by far, most athletes involved as far as a single sport goes. So it's a massive deal because college football right now is in a very strange place. Um, the sport that we grew up watching in the 90s or 2000s or whatever it is, just frankly just doesn't exist anymore. It is a different sport entirely. It's become a creature of its own, and unfortunately, there is now a kind of a big bad at the table. Not that there hasn't been for a while, but it was you could spread the blame around a little bit, and it wasn't just one group or whatever that it was making things difficult. There were certainly major players involved in this, but it wasn't just a unanimous. Oh, this is the person that's messing things up. This is the person that's causing all the problems. But unfortunately, we are starting to circle the drain on that, and no surprise, it is the SEC commissioner Greg Sankey who continues to his march towards being the absolute big bad in college football. Keep so Dukes are wondering why do they care about this is beyond me. So the reason that Congress cares about this, and cares is kind of a funny word to use here because I think they want to get this resolved because this is something that a lot of their voters care about. And I also think that, you know, I think they would probably rather work on something else. I hope they would, because this is, in the grand scheme of all the things in this country that are not great right now and that are difficult and that need to be fixed. College football is one of them, but should not be nearly as high a priority. But unfortunately, so many people have kicked the can down the road on this issue for so long that now you're talking about antitrust issues and you're talking about you know uh, labor disputes and things like that, to the point where now it is becoming a massive problem that Congress does need to weigh in on, because there's um, nobody for decades and decades and decades, really since the 70s and 80s, that has been interested in trying to control this thing and to grow this thing in the right way. Um, the NCAA the NCAA stood there as a figurehead for such a long time, and tried to basically they had to do a fake it till you make it type of thing, and as far as enforcement and trying to act as the governing body for all this. But unfortunately, their bluff was eventually called, and people figured out that the NCAA has no teeth. They can't enforce anything, and that none of these schools are beholden to the NCAA basically at all. And so that's why the NCAA is, as it relates to college football, is basically dead. And frankly, as it relates to most other sports, is not in a good shape. Is not like is doesn't have any of the bite that people thought they had for a long time, or that the NCAA thought they had for a long time. But unfortunately, the reason that Congress cares about this is because they kind of have to now, because you're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars that are getting thrown around, and you're talking about, like I said, you're talking about labor issues, you're talking about antitrust monopoly type issues. There's a lot of major legal components to this that do reach the scale of needing government intervention because it wasn't dealt with a long time ago. If this was dealt with in the 80s or 90s or even the 2000s, if this was dealt with before now, I don't think we wouldn't have to be relying on Congress, your elected representatives and senators. Um, you wouldn't be relying on them to tell you how many football players you can have on your college football roster. But that's just where we are, because the sport, as much as anybody that watching the show loves college football, because it is such a fun sport, and it's such a integral part of the fabric of American sports culture. As great as it is, it is also a deeply stupid sport that can't govern itself, that routinely acts in its own it routinely acts in a self sabotaging way, and lets people um it lets people take control of it that really should not have that type of control. Unfortunately, Greg Sankey, being the commissioner of the SEC, which is pretty inarguably the most powerful conference, the most powerful voice in college football. Um, the Big Ten is there, but they're kind of, unfortunately, the Big Ten is largely turned into the SEC's lapdog. They pretty much just have created a voting block amongst those two, even though the Big Ten doesn't really, they don't make decisions. I mean, Greg Sankey functionally runs both conferences, or he decides for both conferences. He tells the Big Ten what they're supposed to think, which is unfortunate because the Big Ten is an old, historic, proud conference of you know college football royalty and prestige. Um, but now, like I said, they're the SEC's lapdog, and they don't want to stand up. And we get this quote last week from Greg Sankey that says, "I don't need lectures from others about the good of the game," which is an extremely combative and defensive quote from Greg Sankey. And I believe that is because he is feeling the heat about some of these playoff proposals where we're talking about a 4-4-2-2 model where the SEC and the Big Ten get 4 teams and the Big 12 and the ACC get 2, and there's some at larges. And ever since some of these different proposals have come out, um, they've caught a ton of flack on social media and things like that, with basically everybody that matters calling it a genuinely stupid thing, that the SEC is blatantly and publicly trying to rig college football in their favor. And you see there's lots of tweets and memes or something. Oh, well, if the NBA, a sarcastic tweet says, though, the NBA has decided to create automatic playoff bids for the Lakers and Celtics because this year the finals is the Pacers and the Thunder, which is 2 small market teams. And so from now on, they're going to create automatic buy-ins for the Lakers and Celtics and make sure that their big market teams get in the playoffs. And you see there's been lots of versions of that meme, but essentially, like, all of them are trying to demonstrate the idea that it's an objectively stupid thing in your sport, that if you're complaining that not enough of your teams are making the playoff, or making your sports, highest postseason honor, making their postseason play, their playoff, whatever, playing for their championship, that, it's perfectly normal to just say, well, we deserve to have more, so we're just gonna change the structure and do what we want. We're gonna put whoever we want in there, because right now college football doesn't have a commissioner, but the guy that's basically just decided to start acting like the commissioner is Greg Sankey. And obviously he wants to protect the SEC, but also not just protect the SEC, but I believe he has a very specific, I think he has a very specific agenda to try to, like, if it were his decision, he would take 30 or 40 teams from the SEC and the Big Ten, and they would split off and do their own thing and leave everybody else in the dust, because that's just that's what they think will make them the most money. That's what Greg Sankey believes will most easily line his pockets in the future. I think there's a lot of problems with that thinking, even from Greg Sankey's standpoint, because I believe he's completely ignoring the fundamental things that make college football great. And I think they believe that, this is an Iowa State channel. I think Greg Sankey believes that if the SEC and the Big Ten were to peel off and make a 30 or 40 team league, that Iowa State fans would be like, oh, well, now I need to find a team to cheer for in this new league. Like, why would Iowa State fans or Oklahoma State fans or West Virginia fans or Kansas State fans or Clemson fans, well, maybe Clemson because they'd get taken with, or NC State fans or North Carolina fans or Virginia fans, why wouldn't any of them pick a new team to cheer for? Why would they pay attention to that league? They have no rooting interest in that league anymore. This is like, it's not like Greg Sankey is one of those people that believes that, like, everybody has their team and they have an SEC team. Like, we're all Iowa State fans, but we're really all Tennessee fans or LSU fans or Ole Miss fans or whatever. We're also deeply a fan of some SEC school. and that we'll follow them to watch this new league. Or that Oklahoma State fans, they'll cheer for Oklahoma in this new league, even though Oklahoma State would probably get left behind. They'll cheer for Oklahoma because it's the same state and all that. No, they won't. They might tune in to watch Oklahoma lose, but they're not cheering for Oklahoma. They're not cheering for A&M or Texas or anybody else. Big 12, ACC fans, Pac fans, they are not G5 fans. They're not just going to magically up and just move their allegiance over to this new league, which would probably still be playing on Saturdays. And then you'd still have all the rest of the college football doing their thing too. Like, we're going to still follow Iowa State football. Iowa State could drop down to FCS and we would still watch Iowa State football because a lot of us went there. Most of us went there, I think, or, went there, are related to people that went there or are going to be going there in the case of high school students and things like that. We're not going to just cheer for a different team because they went off and played for some self-created, self-important national championship that nobody else cares about. Why would we go watch them? It's not, like I said, I think that goes back to my point about how I think it's even just a dumb idea. I think it's brain dead thinking. It's brain dead logic for Greg Sankey to think that that's even a good idea to break off his own league. But I also think he doesn't like when people challenge him. He's getting super defensive because everybody, even SEC fans, are like, no, this is stupid. Why are we rigging the college football playoff? So finally, people are disagreeing with him and he gets super defensive because his ego is out of control and he doesn't like it very much. And I think he doesn't like it very much that the Big 12 and the ACC have done their best to stand up to the SEC and to throw whatever weight they can around and to, I think Greg Sankey thinks that they've been a thorn in his side. So I think he probably has some sort of grudge against those two conferences. And that comment says what you need to see right there. I don't need lectures from others about the good of the game. He believes Greg Sankey he has a God complex in this scenario. He believes that he alone knows what's best for college football. But he does not realize that his opinion is functionally the opinion of someone that absolutely hates college football and hates what the sport has always been about, and what people love about college football. He either fundamentally misunderstands or detests what the average college football fan appreciates about the sport and appreciates about the game, and why people follow certain teams or follow their schools or whatever else. He doesn't understand that, or he actively hates that someone might cheer for Oklahoma State instead of Oklahoma, or they might cheer for TCU instead of Texas, or they might cheer for NC State instead of Clemson, or something like that. He hates that idea that anybody else, that any other schools have anything to do, or that are in the same league as his beloved sacred SEC. And it's frankly disgusting. And it's going to, I fully believe that if Greg Sankey is able to get his way, I believe that would be the, where we look back in 50 or 100 years or whatever, and college football is completely dead. This frankly just doesn't exist as a sport, or certainly not how it looks like now. That we can look at that and say, this was, of the many problems, the many red flags along the way, this was the moment that college football really turned downwards. That the arrows did not, the arrow no longer pointed straight to the moon in terms of popularity and in terms of money. And I can't, and frankly, I can't even believe that some people are supporting what he has to say and saying like, well, we have the best teams. Like, well, you play 8 conference games. Even the Big 10 plays 9 conference games. They will actually prove themselves over a full season. The SEC teams refuse to do that. And they've got this they've got this feedback loop where the SEC is, well, they're good because they were ranked well in the preseason and all this. And it's just, it's pretty nonsense. I don't understand why people, I do understand why people keep carrying water for this guy. Especially like Oklahoma fans, as soon as they left the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma fans specifically, when they were leaving the Big 12 and going to the SEC, were perfectly willing to get on the floor and start shining Greg Sankey's shoes, and really just kind of bow down to whatever he said because finally they were getting an invite to the beloved SEC and they were free of the scourge that is the Big 12. And it was pretty disgusting behavior, to be frank. And Oklahoma fans were always making these jokes like, "Oh, we just wanted to play Nebraska at night," which is an objectively stupid thing. Like nobody one that's has nothing to do with anything. And also like it's just a stupid joke that's not funny. Um, I mean, frankly, the Oklahoma and Texas and the SEC are responsible for most of this. Yeah, they're responsible for all this realignment, for uh, re reimagining the college football playoff in favor of the SEC and the Big Ten. You know, getting rid of the automatic seeds being in the being the the top four. The conference champions being uh, the top four, and you know they won't admit to it. They won't admit that they caused the problem, but they did. They started this round of it. Did were they reopening a scab or a wound that already was festering and already existed to a certain extent? Yeah, like I said, the NIL and the conference realignment and the march for more and more TV dollars was it's been a long road coming since the 80s, the 70s, when TV started to really blow up and college football started to become a really, really valuable TV product. It was a long road coming, but Oklahoma and Texas, in their moment of greed, decided that they might as well just take care of those two. They should take care of themselves in favor of or at the expense of functionally beginning the slow destruction of college football as a sport. And it's exhausting to hear these types of comments from people like Greg Sankey that are in power year over year after year after year after year, basically insinuating that only a certain handful of teams really actually matter in college football, and that they're the only ones worth listening to. They're the only ones worth, making sure that there's a sport to play and stuff like, it infuriates me because it's just a fundamental misunderstanding misunderstanding of why college football is where it is right now. People are watching and it is worth so much money because it is unique from so many other things, not just in United States, in American sports, but just in world sports. It's like a totally unique thing for how popular it is, given what level of sport it is and the athletes and everything like that. It's a unique thing. And where you're not just a fan because you live near the team, but if you're a fan because your grandparents went there, your parents went there, or you went there, you know, you know, there's deeper connections than just your the proximity of the place you were born to the location of that team. It's a fundamental thing that goes a lot deeper than that. And you have allegiances to these teams that are generations old and thing. It's a it's a precious thing that should be protected. But Greg Sankey, who is, I believe, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I think it's a pretty lukewarm take at best. Is the new big bad of college football, and frankly, somebody like at some point, some of this needs to break, so that way college football itself can break off, get organized under something else, and have a college football czar in charge, a commissioner of the league that can manage all of this. So that way, Greg Sankey can't just throw his weight around and do whatever the fuck he wants and reorganize college football's postseason to fit his own conference. The idea that one conference in college football has the power to essentially rig it in their favor is beyond comprehension. Like imagine in the NFL, if back in the early 2010s when the AFC East was so good because the Patriots were great and the Ravens were really good, the Jets were competent and all this, or let's say you had like the NFC North this past year where it's clearly the best division in football. What if they just said, well, we were the best division in football. We were the best top to bottom. we should get all of our teams in. And then they talk to the NFL and they get the playoffs so that way the NFC North has 3 auto buys. So now automatically 3 NFC North teams get in every single year because well they were the best this past they were the best division in football this year. That sounds that's absurd. Or it's like the NBA, giving the Lakers and Celtics automatic buys. It's absurd. But here we are, and unfortunately, I don't know there's anybody that can really stand up to Greg Sankey and tell him no. Unfortunately, at this point in time, but that's just kind of where we're at, and it's frustrating. Granted, it is frustrating because it's June and there's no football going on. This is probably not something I will dedicate any brain power to once we get to August 1st in training camps, or frankly the second to last week in July, when we have the conference media days, Big 12 media days down in Arlington. As soon as that comes around, it's football mode. We're talking players, coaches, matchups, all that good stuff, and we're not as worried about this infrastructure administrative stuff in the NCAA. But that doesn't change the fact that this directly impacts the future of the sport. And I think conference realignment is probably settled for right now. Like I don't think conferences are doing anything. Their power conferences are pretty much set for what they're going to be at least to 2030, probably closer to 2035, I would guess, before we see teams moving around again. And by then, my guess is that we have some sort of clarification on, by 2030, my guess is we will know if college football is breaking off to be its own thing away from the NCAA and they're just starting a brand new league and it's all going to be restructured, or, if this, we're going to have some clarity on what the college football looks like. College football is going to look like indefinitely in 2030. But, I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. And unfortunately, like I said, I think if Greg Sankey gets its way, I think a lot of teams are going to get screwed. I think they would take 40. I think they would put 20. I think they would take 20 in each conference. So they take the top 40 programs, which is going to be most of the Big Ten and SEC. I do believe that sooner rather than later, they're going to start kicking programs out. I don't think Vanderbilt is in the SEC in 2035. 2030, probably. 2035, I don't think after the next round of TV contracts, I don't think Vanderbilt is in the SEC. I don't know that Purdue or Northwestern are in the Big Ten. I don't know about Rutgers, and I don't know about Maryland. I'm not sure. There's, those two are going to start kicking schools out. As Mississippi State might be in danger of getting kicked out of the SEC. They're going to start kicking schools out, and they're going to consolidate to get to maybe 40 teams. So they might kick those out, but they might grab a couple teams. Like they would grab Clemson and they'd grab Florida State. They'd probably grab Miami. They'd grab those 3 for sure. Would they grab anybody out of the Big 12? I don't know. Maybe Oklahoma State. I don't know. Is Oklahoma State a top 40 brand in college football? They're probably close. If they're not there, they're probably close. I don't know if West Virginia's there. BYU, maybe. Kind of depends on who's winning, I think, for the next 5 years. Like if Iowa State can regularly compete for Big 12 titles and make a playoff or two in the next 5 years, maybe Iowa State gets there. But, if it's top 40, we're going to be on pins and needles to figure out if we're on that cut. Cause right now you're probably in the 40 to 50 range, maybe, maybe 40 to somewhere in the 40 to 60 range. If they take 60 teams to a new power league or something like that, I think Iowa State's probably safely in there. If it's 40, you're pretty nervous. So, the best thing that Iowa State can do in all this time is to just keep winning, which I know is a really like it's a really overly simplistic answer, and it's just like that's the old saying that winning cures everything is fundamentally true, pretty much. That's both from recruiting and from a money standpoint, from season ticket sales to TV contracts, and maybe in the not so distant future, maybe it's trying to play your way into a new power league, which sucks because even if we all say like, well, the G5 is there, they rarely matter as far as like the national title goes. Last year Boise State was very good. They were, they were an automatic bye team. Cincinnati was in a playoff, not that long ago. There occasionally there are G5 programs that do factor in as far as, determining a national champion goes. But for the most part, most of the G5 doesn't really play a factor, but that doesn't matter. That people like the fact that you can watch a MAC game on Thursday night. That's part of the fabric of college football. They want to watch Wazoo, Oregon State late night on a Saturday. That's what college football that's what the college football sickos want to watch. Sure, is Ohio State, Michigan a ratings monster that will always draw 10, 20, 15, 20 million people? Yeah, it's gonna. But does that delegitimize the does that delegitimize the I don't know if importance is the right word, but the um I'll use importance right now because I think that's the word I'm thinking of isn't coming to my head, but the importance of Western Michigan and Toledo facing off against each other, as it relates to the fabric of college football and what's great about it. If you lose out on Tulane playing fun conference games and pushing for a playoff spot, is college football, I think is objectively worse if that comes to fruition. Does it change who's playing for a national title? Probably not. But it makes college football a demonstrably worse thing. It makes it less interesting to follow. All of a sudden, the new college football video game we just got back out is suddenly less interesting because now you can't. Now you're not rebuilding Appalachian State, or you're not taking over Kennesaw State, or this year Missouri State and Delaware that are jumping up. I feel like the Blue Hens are probably going to be a pretty popular dynasty mode team, but you lose some of that stuff. Like I said, all of it factors into the fabric of the sport and what makes it great. And the people in charge right now are either deeply stupid, deeply ignorant, or fundamentally misaligned with the average college football fan. Probably some combination of all three. And maybe not deeply stupid isn't the right word. Like, I don't think Greg Sankey is an unintelligent individual. I think he's probably plenty smart, and I think that's why he's doing what he's doing. But deeply ignorant, or actively opposing the will of the average college football fan. Because I don't think if there was an opinion poll conducted on some of the stuff that the SEC has been proposing, I don't think it would poll very highly. I just don't. And unfortunately, too, the real arbiters of what happens in the college football playoff and all this, unfortunately, the real arbiters of this are ESPN. Pretty much almost all ESPN, since they own the playoff. They essentially get final say in how this thing works out, because the college football conference commissioners can all come together. It's like, oh, we want this model. It's just the top 12 teams, and that's what it is. Or it's just, it's automatic buys for all the conference champions, and or everybody gets 2 automatic bids, and then we do at larges from there. Maybe that's what the solution is. All the conference. Let's say Greg Sankey isn't a complete asshat for one day, and he somehow convinces everybody to buy into a 2-2-2-2-2 model with 4 buys or something, or not 4 buys, with 4 at larges, a 14 team model with 4 at larges, and 10 automatic qualifiers. And you propose that to ESPN. ESPN could just say, we're not interested in televising that. And then all of a sudden now the conference commissioners have to back down. Maybe Fox pays for it, but Fox won't. If ESPN steps away from the table, Fox isn't going to pay what ESPN used to pay. So now the conference commissioners have to deal with losing money because they aren't essentially appeasing what ESPN wants. And ESPN wants to jam in as many high profile Big Ten and SEC matchups as they can. And that sucks because Greg Sankey is in cahoots with them. You have ESPN that wants to churn as much money out of this thing as they possibly can for as long as they possibly can, even though that they continue to be a company that is struggling financially. And then you have a commissioner that is in bed with them and is also just has animus against the Big 12, the ACC, and frankly, the rest of the G5. He just doesn't like college football. he likes SEC football, and I think he knows that he at least needs the Big Ten to also like SEC football, so that way they can go do what they want. But right now he's got the Big Ten sitting nicely in his lap, doing whatever and saying whatever he wants, and that's how he likes it. Kind of is what it is. Wasn't really planning on going for a full hour today. If anybody's got any thoughts, definitely throw them in the chat, throw them in the comments. If anybody wants to call in, the link is in the YouTube chat. Otherwise, probably gonna get ready to wrap it up here pretty quick. But we are just a shade over 2 months away. We're like 10 weeks away from Iowa State football heading to Ireland to take on Kansas State. So fortunately, some of this offseason BS is coming to an end in the near-ish future. Fortunately, about the next month or so, we're still going to be talking about all this, about the House settlement, about Greg Sankey continuing to be a cartoonish villain as far as it relates to college football. But then July comes around. The new college football game comes out July 7th. We're going to have that. And then we're going to have media days. And then preseason camp. And then we are in football mode. As far as I'm concerned, July 7th, when college football 26 comes out, that is college football season. That is when this thing starts, and we can leave all this stuff for next summer. For anybody that's interested, I did mention earlier that we have some college football revamp streams up on the site. Once college football 26 comes out, if you're a member of our Discord community over for Wide Right Natty Light, if you are a member of the Discord community over there, we will be hosting a college football 26 connected dynasty since crossplay is available. So anybody on Xbox or PlayStation will be able to play with each other. So we are going to be hosting a Wide Right Natty Light college football 26 dynasty, and that should be a good time. Oh, we got a caller in. The Dukester is jumping in, a loyal commenter. See if we can bring it in. Can you hear us?
I can. How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thought I'd call in real quick because I have a couple things interesting I'd like to discuss with you. Obviously,
yeah,
first and foremost, I absolutely love that there's a show like this now. I've been wondering for years. I'm like, man, why can't we get one of those online every week type of shows for ISU? And I'm so happy you're doing it now. Now, I have to admit to you, when I first started listening, I had no idea you were the Wide Right Natty Light guy. I had no idea. And then I was like, wait. And then I saw your was Wide Right Natty Light, and I was like, oh wow, it is him. And so I went to confirm it, and I saw you wrote a lot of those pages on ISU. So, but first and foremost, well, one of the things I've always been interested in is in your opinion, at least, what is the deepest position that Iowa State has currently going into next season? And what is the best overall position group going into Iowa State next season?
Good question. I think the deepest, I can give you one on each side of the ball. I think deepest on the offensive side of the ball is probably tight end. You look at Ben Bramer's coming back. He should be, he'll be fully healthy. And I think the I think pretty much everybody that's seen him play knows that if he can keep it healthy, he can keep healthy for an entire season, that he's first team all conference, type of player. But you look at like Gabe Burkle had a really nice end of last season. I know Cooper Alexander is a guy, a young guy that they have a lot of faith in, think he can be a really big time player. You've got Tyler Moore moving over to the Steve O'Klotz role, which I think he'll be very good at. They've probably got 5-6 guys that they feel comfortable with in that room. So deepest, I'm gonna say tight end. Best is an interesting one. Actually, sorry. On the defensive side of the ball, deepest I think is linebacker. On the basis that we saw so many people play last year, so many people got starts last year. You're talking about the first 10 guys in that room have started games for Iowa State. That's an unbelievable amount of depth.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It really is. It is wild.
It's not normal at all for that to happen.
No, it's not. No, it's not at all. And that was it talked a little bit about it last year. All the injuries piled up, but I thought that the silver lining could be is like, well, you're going to get basically everybody back. And now they're going to have a year of experience under their belt. And you're going to have so many snaps available to you in that depth chart. It's crazy. And that's not even talking about like Caleb Bacon's coming back, and you've got Caleb Rosina healthy and Cooper Ebel's back. You've got everybody. You've got your top end guys back healthy, and you've got a whole bunch of your depth has played a lot of snaps. You can't buy that kind of experience. Best overall is an interesting one. I think the highest ceiling, I'm going to say the highest ceiling is the running backs. The depth behind Carson Hansen and Abu Sama, we haven't seen really at all. We haven't seen Dylan Lee. We've only seen little bits and pieces of Aiden Flora, and we haven't seen River Peppers at all. But we know that Carson Hansen and Abu Sama can both ball. We know that they're good running backs. If Abu Sama can improve his vision and can be better about hitting his gaps and really punching through the line on time, he can really take off and be a big time running back. And then obviously we know Carson Hansen is super solid, can do anything he wants. Those
Sama
two guys
has the highest potential of.
I couldn't agree more.
He is the highest potential, of anybody on that team. Watching him play, it's like I played running back in high school, and I also have helped out with running backs on youth before and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it always is crazy to me how it feels like Sama just needs to work on his vision. I feel like his vision is the one thing that if he just gets that down even a little bit, that explosive ability that he has, and he's way stronger than he looks. Well, he looks strong, but I'm saying for his size, he is way stronger than that. Yeah.
He's
it's crazy. He just needs to work on his vision, and if he gets that down,
because right now,
oh my goodness,
if the line gets a little bit plugged up, he gets pretty impatient, and he just immediately bounces it to the outside every single time. Which knowing when to bounce it is like a huge key for a guy like him that's so dangerous in the open field. Sometimes he gets a little antsy to bounce it outside, but then there's other times where he's just indecisive. If the line gets clogged up, he gets indecisive and his decision making as far as when to bounce it outside, when to cut back isn't always.
He will settle for just submarining into multiple tacklers, and it's just oh man, just try to bounce. Just try to bounce one time. I'm telling you, you will have success, dude. You're one of the fastest people on the field. I promise.
Yeah. So if that light switch can come on, I think Abu Sama is a phenomenal running back, and he can be a really, really high end running back. And then Carson Hansen is a great running partner with him. But we've heard so many good things about Dylan Lee over this past season. And I made this point on a couple months ago when I was talking about the recruiting classes, that I think River Peppers is going to be awesome. I think he's going to be really good. I don't know if
I got a chance to watch his highlights,
but man, River Peppers his high school highlights are really, really interesting. And
he's got that David Montgomery feel to him.
He does. He does. But you can tell he's got more top end speed than David did, though. But he does. Yes. You're exactly right, though. That his tape looks a lot like David, where he just refuses to be tackled, just keeps trucking and going, and just does an awesome job. He's great in the passing game. I really think that if we can see a little bit out of whatever Dylan Lee gets for carries this year, I think that room has a really high potential. I also want to give a shout out there to the receivers, because I think Xavier Townsend is going to be on track for 100 catches and 1,000 yards kind of guy. Like I really do. Like I think they're going to feed him the ball the way they fed Jalen Noel or the way they fed Xavier Hutchinson. I think they're going to give him the ball as much as they possibly can. But Chase Stoll will be there. You've got Greenback. You've got Dominic Overby. You've got lots of really interesting names there. There's just, you need guys to step up, and you're losing 2,000-yard receivers, which is tough. But
yeah, that's going to be tough to replace on any team, right. Let alone ISU.
I wouldn't be shocked if
or perennial North.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if early in the season we see some more of that 12-13 personnel we saw with when you had Charlie Chase and Dylan Sainer. You saw a lot of that 13 personnel. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw some of that, especially early in the season while the receivers are still getting up to speed.
So call me crazy, but so I was watching a lot of obviously the tight ends last year. Sure. Unfortunately, Bramer did get injured quite a bit.
Yeah.
Which was just sad because I feel like he does have that talent to become not just a good tight end in the Big 12 or a good tight end Iowa State wise, but one of the better tight ends in the country.
Yeah,
because he's got the frame, size,
really good at tight end. Yeah.
And then, but I gotta be honest with you, I was extremely impressed with Burkle. Burkle came out of nowhere. I felt like
last half
he had
season,
a couple
Burkle was awesome. Yeah,
he was great, and I even told people, I was like, if Bramer comes back and he struggles a little bit, do not be shocked if Iowa State is quick to make a turn to Burkle, because I think Burkle is extremely talented, and I think even Iowa State is starting to realize that.
Well, and I don't even think it's so much as a turning to Burkle, because I think they're just going to run them both out there. I think they think the world of Gabe Burkle. I think a lot of people think the world of Gabe Burkle. So like, if I personally am a believer that like a fully healthy for 12 games Ben Bramer is Mackey Award good. But
agreed.
Gabe Burkle had his November and December last year were phenomenal. He was so good. Even if Bramer struggles a little bit or still is struggling to stay healthy, I don't think that would concern them if they have to go back to, if Gabe Burkle becomes the lead there, and then like I said, Cooper Alexander is there as well. I think he's a redshirt freshman. He's a guy that was highly recruited in high school. We straight up stole him from Oklahoma. I think that's a guy he's going to get snaps. And I think, like I said, if Ben Bramer still struggles with injuries, I think if you run Gabe Burkle and Cooper Alexander out there, I think you're perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the tight end room is super deep, and you got to know if you have an offensive coordinator that knows how to use them. I think that's a big deal.
So this next one is a little interesting, but so is there any position, like when you rewatch games, for example, obviously when you're watching games, you're kind of your eyes are darting everywhere, looking around, trying to see things happening on the field. But like, if you ever like rewatch games, is there any like positions that you watch specifically just because you love to watch that specific position work? Because for me, I actually play semi-pro football. I don't know if you've heard of it. We all basically just get together on weekends and we throw on some pads and we play tackle football. You
used to have a semi-pro league around here in Eastern Iowa for a little while.
Yeah, I know there was a team up in Des Moines, the Iowa Blaze.
Yeah.
Or the Des Moines Blaze or something like that.
Yeah, there was a small league over here in Eastern Iowa too. Like Dubuque had a team, Cedar Rapids had a team, and like a couple, there was like one in Wisconsin, another one in Western Illinois, stuff like that. It was a small little deal. But yeah, anyways, continue.
Yeah. So for me, I played defensive end. I recently just finished out a season last year with the team I was playing with currently in Omaha. I actually had a pretty good season. I think I had like 14 and a half sacks. It was pretty fun.
Nice.
Good times. But So I love watching D linemen do their work. I don't know what it is about it. I just love now having that appreciation now playing defensive line has made me absolutely love watching the defensive linemen work. And the thing I've noticed about ISU's defensive linemen, I just feel like there's so many of them that just run headfirst into guys. And it's just like, where are the hands? Like, you want to know who's the only guy on the line who used his hands? Dominique Orange. He wasn't just running into guys. He was what we like to call propping, which is you're basically taking your hand, you're getting it straight as you possibly can, or as far out as you possibly can to create the most space possible.
Right.
He does that.
He very good at using his size and getting leverage. He's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Now it obviously helps when you're 350 pounds and 6'4", but
and you know, as explosive as he is too.
Exactly. It's like, and that's the same thing with McDonald. Yeah, McDonald was, you know, a smaller defensive lineman, but he loved to use his hands.
Gosh.
And I feel like so many people, I feel like it seems like so many guys when they go into college when they're younger, they just don't know how to use their hands. And that's obviously, you know, on the D-line coaches to get them right. And I have a lot of confidence in our D linemen, or our D lineman coach, I should say. But it just feels like the guys haven't quite caught on to like using their hands more, punching, throwing, pulling, you know, chopping. It doesn't seem like there's anybody who's really standing out on that level. Now, granted, we were very young. Were we young? I can't remember exactly. I know we had a couple of seniors, but for the most part,
pretty much everywhere except the secondary, we were very young last year.
Yeah, so I am hoping that the new guys coming in at D-line will help out. I don't think Cannon Butler is going to be anything like spectacular by any means, but I do think he's going to find a role someplace on this defensive line. Yeah. But anyway, back to the question at hand, as I said, is there any position that like you just love to like watch and kind of pick your brain with like that in any way?
Good question. I would say, on the offensive side of the ball, I specifically like watching wide receiver patterns to see what they're doing to distract, like to pull safeties to off to the side of the field and get guys in space. I you know, and that includes the tight ends, obviously. I like going back and really looking at the patterns and seeing like how they're using, you know, this motion to bring a linebacker a little bit, you know, to get a linebacker to cheat outside a little bit, and then they can use, you know, the tight end up the seam or something like that. You know, or using flood concepts to get guys open, or you know, finding backdoor slants and things like that. I really like watching route running patterns and things like that as a whole group, not just individual guys, and you know, just seeing like how good of an individual route runner they are, but really seeing how all the patterns work together and what they did to scheme certain guys open. Because that's one thing Iowa State does really well, is just scheme guys open. Because you know, yeah, I mean, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins were very good athletes and very good players. But typically speaking, Iowa State doesn't have like guys that are, you know, they don't have a Jeremiah Smith or a Ryan Williams or something like that, where they are you just throw them on the field.
God, I wish.
They're just going to get open. You know, to a certain extent, like you still have to be able to scheme guys open, and Iowa State does a very good job of that, of getting guys in space to catch the ball, to make plays after the catch, things like that. So I really like watching that. On the defensive side of the ball, I'm almost always glued to the linebackers, watching how they're seeing run fits, how they're playing, how they're seeing play action, how they're dealing with tight ends, things like that, and really how they're controlling the middle of the football field. Because Iowa State's defense, especially. And I think this relates to what you were talking about with the defensive line and kind of how they've been really hit or miss over the last, most of the Campbell era, is because Iowa State's defensive scheme is so predicated on having an anchor in the middle of the field at all three levels. You know, your nose tackle, your middle linebacker, and your high safety there, to really control the middle of the field and to direct traffic. So like, because Iowa State's playing three defensive linemen, asking a guy, it's hard to, you can't really just tell your defensive end to just pin his ears back and go get it. Now, when you have a guy like Will McDonald, you scheme, you adjust your scheme to let that guy just pin his ears back and go get the quarterback, because he's so good at it. his strength is so far beyond anybody else on the field of what they can deal with that you find a way to alter your defensive scheme to let Will McDonald, do his thing and be really good at it. But
get him one-on-one, basically.
Right, exactly right. Yeah,
find a way to get him one-on-one.
That's exactly right. So, but when you don't have Will McDonald, one of the most unblockable pass rushers I've ever seen.
You can't really scheme.
When when you don't have that guy, I think defensive ends, especially when they get to college, they want to pin their ears back. And that's what all defensive ends want to do for the most part, is they want to pin their ears back and go get the quarterback. I would say defensive scheme. Can't confirm. I would say its defensive scheme really wants the defensive line to hold gaps, to clog up the line, so that way they can spill runs and they can spill the quarterback to the outside where their linebackers and really, especially their safeties, can make tackles. So they're asked to do something a little bit different than they would be in a 4-3 or a 4-2-5 or whatever it is. They're asked to do something a little bit different. And I think that takes a little bit of a role adjustment. But I also think that there has to be a little bit of an adjustment on expectations as far as stat counting goes, productivity goes, because like I said, the scheme isn't necessarily built for the defensive line to rack up tons and tons of numbers. Now, if you have individually great players like a Will McDonald, Dominic Orange, those guys, they can and are capable of putting up big numbers because they're just so good at what they do. But aside from having extraordinarily good players, the scheme isn't really designed to have defensive linemen, they're not going to get a 12 to 15 sack pass rusher off the defensive line that often.
Exactly. Which I understand that.
Yeah. And that's why that's part of the reason I like watching the linebackers too, is because when the defensive line is doing their thing, the linebackers really have to be really disciplined as far as maintaining their gap discipline and not shooting gaps too far, not missing attack angles. And it's really interesting to watch the linebackers in Iowa State schemes because they have to be really smart. They have to know, they have to be in the right place at the right time all the time. And I would say, generally speaking, we have great linebackers, and they're so good at tracking the ball to the other side of the field that it's really fun to watch that group.
I loved watching Brazina for that exact reason.
Oh yeah, Brazina is awesome.
I felt like when Brazina was on the field, I felt like there was just some sort of it really does feel like him and Ebel are kind of like the hit squad, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
they love getting downhill. They absolutely love it. Brazina especially.
Yeah,
we like to call it. So it's just a funny joke between football players, but we like to call them the CTE men. They love just dishing. They love dishing it out. They don't care. They love to dish it out. But all right, I do one quick one because I see it's almost an hour for you. Give me your prediction of the starting three on the D line for ISU next year.
Okay, well, Dominic Orange is the obvious starter at nose tackle.
Well, I don't know. I'm just kidding. No.
Yeah. just have him. So I think you'll probably see Miles Mendezoon. I don't know if he's the starter though. That's tough. Because he played a lot towards the end of last year, and since he's gotten moved to defensive end, being a 3-tech guy, he's starting to play more and more. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm gonna pull up the roster here and see what my options are, just to make sure I'm not forgetting somebody.
Is that a good or a bad thing that you have to pull up the roster to figure it out?
Yeah. I guess it depends on how you feel about the transfer portal, really. Let's see here. Let's organize that position. Okay, so yeah, Miles Mendezoon did play a bunch towards the end of last year. I know Vontroy Malone is a transfer coming in. I think they think he can definitely be a contributor. Tomato McDonough.
A lot of people are predicting him.
Yeah, Tomato McDonough is another transfer that just came in. I'm not sure what he looks like. Trevor Don is interesting. He's a true freshman though, and they typically don't run.
He needs to put on size as well.
He's pretty small. He's only 225, which, I mean, Will McDonald played at 235 for most of his career. I mean, he's not that far apart. If he could put on 10 or 15 pounds this offseason. Maybe he can get some snaps, but he's probably a little too young. I know Zamir
Helps when you're
Hawk is a
faster
guy
than everyone.
Zamir Hawk is a guy that's interesting. I don't know if he's there as far as I think Zamir Hawk would be the backup to Dominic Orange. Jace Gilbert could be a contender there. Akene Eziogu, I think, would probably be one I would pencil in right now as a starter. I would say Akene Eziogu and Dominic Orange. The other one,
can't forget about Samuel Same.
I know, but
you have no idea what he's going to look like coming in. I mean, if he puts on size, they've raved about his athletic abilities.
For what it's worth,
sort of like.
For what it's worth, he's actually not on the roster on Cyclones.com right now.
Oh, really? Oh, did he transfer?
I don't know. Did he?
That actually would be wild. I mean, not that wild.
So Samuel Same. I mean, I don't know. I don't see anything that says he transferred.
Well, we'll just assume he transferred then, I guess.
I don't know. I mean, like 247 doesn't have the transfer, but he's like Samuel Same is not on the Cyclones.com roster. I'm looking at this right now. He's not on the roster.
Yeah, so I'm going to guess he's either transferred or retired.
I would say he's either transferred or retired. I guess I don't know. He's not on the roster, so that's kind of weird.
Maybe he switched to basketball.
I have no idea. Akene Eziogu and Dominic Orange, I think, are going to be there. As far as the other guy goes, I think right now my prediction is going to be Vontroy Malone, but it would not shock me if Miles Mendezun was the other one. I think that's what I'm going to go with.
I was just thinking about it. We've seen Iowa State trot out 2D tackles for those three linemen. I mean, if you remember, they did, I believe it was Singleton and, oh gosh, who was the other guy?
Well, so they had Singleton and, because Eni Wazirike also played some, but Eni was kind of unique because he could go out to defensive end. There was a while, there was the 1 year, I think it was 2020, where once in a while they would put Latrell Bankston and Isaiah Lee out there at the same time.
What could have been? God, I still am upset about that.
I was really high on Latrell Bankston, and I was really pleased with how he played. Isaiah Lee can go to hell, but I'm sorry if you bet against if you shave points, you're playing for Iowa State and you shave points, you can go all the way to hell.
Yeah, no, I feel that. But, I completely forgot about him, to be honest. I just purged him from my memory.
That's fair enough. So I'm gonna go with that for right now. But we'll see. We'll get more. We'll hear more about it in fall camp, especially. I know a lot of people are talking about Vontroy Malone, and that that could be the guy. I think could be your third one there. But I do think Eziogu and Dominic Orange will be your other two. Dominic Orange, I think, is the only automatic, definitely starting.
For sure. There's no way he's not gonna start. They would be dumb to not start him.
I know, yeah.
But anyway.
Something went wrong. So
right, exactly. Well man, it was a pleasure.
I appreciate you tuning in every week and all that good stuff. So tell your friends. If you like the show, tell your friends. Same with everybody else.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate when people comment and stuff like that. Just monologuing by myself for an hour is tough. But
I understand, man.
We're getting there. So it's also June and there's not much to talk about. But
right, exactly.
Fortunately, we're on to quiet. We're in the era of quiet off seasons for Iowa State now. No gambling investigations, no conference realignment, none of that.
Thank God.
Yeah, no kidding. So appreciate you tuning in. We'll see everybody. I'm going to be off next week, so no show next week. But in 2 weeks we will be back talking about something, maybe house settlement. Who knows? But appreciate. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again in a couple weeks. Thanks for everybody else for tuning in. And we will see you guys all again in a couple weeks for another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. Everybody have a good rest of your week. Good next week. And go Cyclones.